Drew Pritchard startled his supporters in 2024 with a move. He made all the sales. The antique signage, the fairground boat, and even parts of Buckingham Palace are no longer there. $800,000 was raised by more than 620 items. However, money was not the issue. It was a capitulation. The closed shop, the divorce, the affairs, and the pub ban all contributed to this point. He was selling his soul, the king of British salvage. You will be devastated by the reasons behind his decision to sell his life's passion at auction. It was more than just business. It was farewell. In February 1970, Drew Pritchard was born in Conway, a historic town in North Wales. He was raised in a modest home beneath the shadow of medieval castles, when money was scarce and times were hard. In order to make ends meet, his parents operated a little corner store. The region was having a lot of trouble in the 1970s. Many families, including his, were struggling to stay warm over the winter, as jobs were being eliminated. When Drew began to view rubbish differently, he was just 8 years old. Drew rummaged around dumps and flea markets, while other children played games. He amassed more than 500 bottle caps by 1978, which he utilized as cash at school. He was perceived by several neighbors as merely an odd child with an odd fixation. However, nobody truly knew what was going on inside his thoughts. His grandfather, a World Military II veteran who had previously smuggled military items back from Europe, had given him the secret behind it all. He narrated tales to young Drew about lost history and treasures. In Drew, these tales ignited a passion that never extinguished. He began infiltrating abandoned locations and former scrapyards. He once narrowly avoided being buried alive after escaping from a pile of tumbling trash. He accumulated a personal collection of vintage coins and war memorabilia, valued at over $200 by the time he was 12 years old. To earn pocket money, he even started selling the extras. In the midst of a dilapidated community, Drew was quietly laying the foundation for something significant. It wasn't much simpler at home. In the 1970s, his family made only $5,000 a year, which meant many sacrifices, no frills, and little money for heating. His father had been a signwriter. He used genuine gold leaf to paint stunning pub signs. Drew began observing him at work when he was 6 years old. His passion for restoring antiques really started at that point. However, nobody discussed the dangers of such paints. His father suffered from tremors due to the lead in them. Drew saw it all by 1980. He started stealing tools from his dad's kit to fix damaged toys when he was just 10 years old. Once, while working on an ancient wind-up car from the 1950s, he was electrocuted and required stitches. In addition, he began disassembling damaged bicycles from the trash of his neighbors and keeping them in the backyard until it resembled a junkyard. People started complaining about rats because it got so terrible. Drew, however, was unable to stop. He had repaired and sold roughly 50 objects at markets by the time he was 12, earning more than $300. He was profoundly impacted by his father's approach of fusing restoration and art. However, Drew wasn't always aware of the dangers. He inhaled poisonous vapors and applied hazardous varnishes without understanding the potential harm they could cause. Then, in 1982, a flood damaged $1,000 worth of inventory in their family business. Drew took action while his folks were inconsolable. He saved as much as he could. That was a glimpse of the guy he would grow into. Things didn't go so well in school. Drew's grades were appalling when he first enrolled at Yscol Aberanwy in 1975. He was in the bottom 10% of the class by 1980. Teachers at the time assumed he was lazy or preoccupied because no one realized he had dyslexia. They were blind to Drew's extracurricular activities. He was missing more than 100 lessons. In order to investigate ancient slate quarries, he discovered a secret World War, the second bunker filled with hazardous materials in one of them. When he reported it, he kept his name to himself out of fear of being caught. The only subject in which Drew really excelled was art. His renderings of dilapidated Victorian structures were so brilliant that he received $50 Sand, a regional prize in 1983. Even his escapades, however, were risky. He shattered his arm when he fell through the decaying floor of an old mill in 1984. He kept it a secret out of fear of being prohibited from exploring ever again. By the age of 15, he had visited 40 deserted locations and collected relics valued at about $500. He led his pupils on frantic searches and created treasure maps. He almost got expelled for these excursions, but they also helped him develop the fearless, inquisitive nature that made him a millionaire in the end. Drew began working part-time at a Llandudno auto repair shop when he was 15 years old. The year was 1985, and he made $2 per hour working long summer days amid sparks, metal, and oil. He acquired the skills necessary to repair vintage vehicles, such as 1950s Jaguars. He has assisted in the restoration of 20 autos by 1986, but there were risks associated with the profession. He still bears the scar from a severe welding accident that severely burned his hand. At that time, he repaired his first piece of antique furniture, an oak chair from the 1920s, and sold it for $100. The owner of the business, a former racing car driver, told outrageous tales of smuggling auto components. Drew's imagination was blown away by that. Drew accumulated $800 by the time he was 16 and used it to buy the right equipment. However, he was unaware of the garage's involvement in dubious activities. He had used stolen parts without realizing it. When the authorities raided the store in 1987, they took $10,000 worth of merchandise. That was the last straw. Drew gave up and didn't turn back. However, the abilities he acquired there would influence the remainder of his life. In 1986, Drew discovered something that completely altered his life. In a nearby yard, a dusty Victorian gas lamp is hidden beneath 2 tons of trash. It turned out to be a genuine antique, created by designer William Sugg in the 1880s. He sold it for $50 and bought better tools with the proceeds. He made around $400 that year by salvaging 15 additional items, but there was a lot of asbestos in the junkyard. Additionally, Drew later said that he was afraid working there had harmed his health. Additionally, he received assistance from a former trash trader who taught him to look more closely and showed him how some items had hidden chambers that might have even contained smuggled stones. What he was doing was not supported by his parents. After a disagreement, Drew packed up his belongings and spent a week living in his van. However, that didn't deter him. He achieved 50 sales and earned $2,000 from the sale of refurbished antiques by 1987. During a period when Wales's youth unemployment rate was close to 15%, Drew had already managed to make it through and prosper. When Drew turned 18 in 1988, he entered the world of antiques. He didn't have specialized training or attend college. Rather, he became an apprentice to a stained glass restorer. The work began modestly. He moved heavy doors and scrubbed dusty vases. However, something snapped one day when a van with the words "Architectural Antiques" inscribed on it pulled up. He understood that this was more than a job. It was a secret world teeming with unique artifacts, talented artisans, and mysteries. Over the course of the following 7 years, Drew worked on everything from elaborate fireplaces in historic homes to stained glass windows. He learned more than simply how to fix things. Where others saw garbage, he discovered value. Drew made his first solo purchase in 1988 as well. He just spent $100 in a pair of damaged Georgian chairs that he discovered. He worked on repairing, sanding, carving, and revitalizing them for weeks. He was on the correct track when he eventually sold them for $300. However, this spirit of trade had begun years before. When he was 12 years old and in school, he would exchange dinner tickets for boots. As he considered how to make minor victories into major ones, he listened to punk bands like Madness and The Jam. 5 years later, in 1993, he opened his first modest showroom, thanks to the same reasoning. Then 1990 arrived. Drew accomplished something most people wouldn't do at the age of 20. With virtually no money and no knowledge of French, he drove his ancient van all the way to France and went treasure hunting. He visited Normandy markets and purchased rare Art Deco furniture and lights for less than $500. His package was questioned by customs officials, but he managed to return everything to Wales. His charisma got him through even though he had no official documentation. He made 3 times as much money when he sold the goods back home. This journey helped him see the wider picture. He was no longer merely a local picker. He began purchasing from countries like Norway, establishing a network throughout Europe. But not all of the deals were successful. When Drew was 21 years old in 1991, a shipment of French pottery arrived completely destroyed, costing him $500. They were all wrecked because of his bad packing. It felt like a stomach punch. Back then, money like that meant the world to him. Nevertheless, he chose to create mosaic art out of the broken pieces rather than give up. He transformed tragedy into beauty by selling them at fairs. At the age of 22, Drew operated a modest stand at Conway Market in 1992. He offered vintage chairs and teak tables, as well as other mid-century pieces for sale. He sold the artifacts for 3 times the amount he paid for them. Despite his lack of formal schooling, He had already established a local network of 50 loyal customers. He continued to restore stained glass, frequently balancing the two occupations in bitter cold. He would rise early to travel to fairs like Newark early, searching for gems before anyone else entered. It brought back memories of his early years, when he would sell bicycle parts on the side of the road in order to pay for candy. Drew Pritchard launched his first antique store in Conway, North Wales, in 1993 at the age of just 23. All he had was a desire and a $2,000 loan from the neighborhood bank. After completing a 7-year apprenticeship repairing stained glass, he began looking for ancient, lost fragments from buildings that had been demolished. He even pulled out unique stained glass windows by William Morris in a ruined church in Holey. It was risky, but they were worth thousands. It was crumbling. He generated a $5,000 profit by the end of that year. However, it wasn't simple. A rival distributed false information that Drew was inexperienced in an attempt to destroy his loan. Nevertheless, his store became popular, and he was approached by those who were building new homes or renovating old ones in search of authentic, one-of-a-kind items. His small store even contributed to the town's increased tourism. By 1995, Drew's business practices had evolved. He began collaborating with demolition teams all throughout the United Kingdom. Drew would purchase the priceless items from buildings that were going to be demolished before they were lost forever. He once paid $800 for stained glass windows from the 19th century that he saw in a van. Edward Burne-Jones created them, and they are valued at $2,600. He doubled his money by selling them soon. However, things did not go as planned. While assisting Drew in gathering rusty iron bits at one location, workers discovered a live bomb from World War II. It caused him to lose $1,000 in delays and shut down operations for days. Nevertheless, his collection continued to expand. He began preserving cast iron radiators from shuttered factories and massive wood beams from barns. He gained popularity among London designers and was now saving more than 50 tons of outdated materials annually. In 1997, there was a significant setback. Silver candlesticks and brass objects from a historic Liverpool shipyard were among the $1,500 worth of goods stolen by thieves who stormed into his store. It was a misty night when the break-in took place. They left everything in disarray and used crowbars. Drew was devastated. Only $800 was paid by insurance. He was on the verge of bankruptcy. Some of the items were discovered at a neighboring pawn shop, and it turned out that the burglars were locals. Less than half of them were found by the police. Drew didn't risk anything else. He relocated some of his collection to safer storage and spent $2,000 in new security equipment. He even began purchasing sturdy safes to resell. In Wales, thefts from antique shops increased by 25% in the same year. But Drew was not going to give up. His firm had significantly expanded by the year 2000. His annual salary had increased to $50,000. In industrial salvage, he had discovered his new passion. He extracted machine parts from Scottish shipyards and outdated bulbs from Manchester industries. He once spent only $500 in a huge engine lathe. It was 2 tons in weight. He fixed it up and got $4,000 for it. That's a profit of 8 times. He was collecting old signs when the roof of a warehouse nearly collapsed on him. He saved 100 enamel signs by making his getaway just in time. He saw a 3-fold increase in his clientele, and even celebrities began purchasing from him. He was handling more than 1,000 pieces annually and now had 2 aides. The work was not always lawful, though. One time, he was fined $2,000 for collecting, without the required permissions. Nevertheless, he became known as a junkyard genius, and by the end of the decade, he had over $1 million in net worth. He had a huge break in 2002. He was engaged to furnish antique lighting for a large hotel in London. He made $10,000 from just one transaction after discovering 50 antique lamps in abandoned warehouses. Today, that would be over $18,000. The fact that one of the purchasers was a well-known actor led to the acquisition of further affluent customers. Extracted from a long-gone theater, these lamps were stunning examples of Art Deco design from the 1920s. However, Drew also ventured into the dangerous realm of phony antiques and dubious merchants. Nevertheless, the transaction increased his annual salary. Some rivals weren't pleased. There were rumors that someone was attempting to obstruct his supply chain. By 2004, Drew stunned readers with an article titled "Salvaging Industrial Heritage." He described the number of priceless antique devices being demolished at scrapyards. According to him, between 1990 and 2000, 70% of the industrial sites in the UK had already been lost. He even prevented the crushing of a $50,000 steam engine from the 1850s. It was a national story. His store was overrun with customers. In a few months, foot traffic increased by 150%. It didn't matter if some detractors claimed he was merely glamorizing garbage. 12 historic places were saved as a result of his voice-changing laws. Then he took an even bolder step in 2005. He began using eBay to market antiques. eBay was rife with fakes at the time. 40% of antique listings were fraudulent. Drew nevertheless took the chance. In a Welsh attic, he discovered a stunning grandfather clock from the 18th century, which he sold to a buyer in New York for $5,000. There were 22 bidders, and it became crazy. The clock has engravings dating back to 1760 and had been buried since World War II. Someone attempted to hack his account shortly after the sale, but he was able to stop it in time. That year, he increased his online sales. Conventional dealers were upset. He was even boycotted by some. Drew didn't care though. He had introduced everyone to the world of antiques. Drew concentrated on a highly personal project in 2006. Big auction houses like Sabes were dominating the market with items from Wales, and Drew couldn't compete on size, so he decided to stand out. He began gathering slate furnishings and other items from historic Welsh structures. Snuonia sold one table for $3,000. Slate was scarce at the time due to mine closures and skyrocketing prices. His emphasis on Welsh heritage prevented the conversion of 15 former quarry sites into residential areas. But then there was danger. His warehouse was vandalized, costing him $2,000. Later, he learned that police had seized $100,000 worth of goods from a clandestine market that sold counterfeit Welsh antiques. Drew was no longer solely an antiques dealer. He was defending a way of life. He refurbished a 50-piece collection of Georgian furniture for a major London museum in 2008. He needed 6 months. One 1780 chair featured a secret chamber that held $20,000 worth of correspondence from the American Revolution. He received $15,000 for the entire project. Although it wasn't flawless, it also attracted the attention of BBC producers. The show was nearly destroyed by one of the artifacts, which was a fake. Nevertheless, the effort prevented storage room's brittle furniture from collapsing. When Salvage Hunters debuted on Quest TV in 2011, everything changed. The show was a hit on its first night. When Drew visited an abandoned estate in the Scottish Highlands, he discovered cast iron garden urns. He sold them for $2,200 after negotiating a price reduction from $1,500 to $800. A storm almost destroyed the props during production, but Drew managed to make it work, and 500,000 viewers watched. This was the beginning of something really important. He shot an episode in 2012 inside a dilapidated local tavern in Wales. He spent only $2,000 in everything. However, he discovered a $5,000 chandelier from the 1800s that had been neglected while sorting through the chaos. He sold the pub's goods for $8,000 sols and used special crystals from a secret source in Paris to restore it. The pub was once a shelter for smugglers. The show's ratings increased by 20% just because of that story. In 2013, he began shooting overseas. He paid $1,200 for a Tiffany-style lamp that he discovered in a dirty warehouse in Belgium. The light was connected to a 1920s incident involving a Belgian aristocrat. It was well received by viewers, and he gained 150,000 new followers. However, the hazards also increased. He nearly got into jail in Germany because of a $4,500 clock. He purchased a vase in Hungary, but it proved out to be a fake. The show became a worldwide success, but he lost $500. Drew and his friend John T. cleared up a Cambridge warehouse in 2014. Buried in the dust was a Norton motorcycle from the 1920s. They sold it for $15,000 after purchasing it for $3,000. There was a twist. It had originally belonged to a World War I veteran. Filming was postponed because of safety inspections at the World War II armament storage facility. This work can be quite dangerous, as that instance demonstrated. Salvage Hunters had 100 episodes by 2015. He made $1,200 after discovering a sculpture of a black bug in York. His wealth skyrocketed to $8 million. However, his personal life suffered. He had an affair with a woman who was married. The woman's husband was fined $21 when it resulted in a fight in a pub in January 2015. The local pubs banned Drew. The show continued despite the controversy. The number of watchers soared to 1 million. He sold his previous facility in 2016 and relocated a portion of his operations to Gloucester. He had always worked from North Wales, so this was a significant shift. In spite of their 2017 divorce, his revenues increased. He made $15,000 by providing supplies for a large renovation. His company was valued at $9 million by 2023. He earned $20,000 in 2017 by providing antiques for a historical drama. Norwegian Manors was the source of some of the items. Rebecca was awarded a portion of $5 million in assets in court. Drew continued to work. When he built a new store in Conway, he began to attract celebrities and visitors. Marco Pierre White even came to visit. He also started brainstorming concepts for books. He published a book about antique restoration in 2018. It featured tales from his professional life, such as the 2011 restoration of artifacts from Buckingham Palace. In the first month, he made $50,000 and sold 10,000 copies. After an unsuccessful auction earlier in which he only made $5,500 instead of his planned amount, that helped him bounce back due to financial constraints, he was forced to halt his home renovation project at the same time. He only completed 2 levels, so he returned to online sales and the Conway scrapyards he had adored as a child. His book established him as a genuine authority and paved the way for TV spin-offs such as Salvage Hunters and Classic Cars. In the meanwhile, Rebecca and Drew Pritchard met in 1998. She was employed at a real estate company, and they clicked right away. It was quick. In the same year they were married. Tom, their son, was born in 1999. Even though life went by fast, they enjoyed making the most of the little things in life. They raised more than a child. He grew up surrounded by antiques. While his parents were at work, little Tom would polish silverware. He was only 5 years old in 2004 and was already able to distinguish between authentic and counterfeit goods. Saving money on childcare, which at the time cost roughly $500 per month, wasn't the only goal. It turned into a means of strengthening familial ties. However, Rebecca stayed at home and raised Tom primarily by herself as Drew began to travel more in search of antiques. Quiet tension began to build at that point. Grace, their daughter, was born in 2003. By that time, they were residing in a stunning old chapel that Drew had purchased for just $10,000 in 1995. When he discovered it, it was deserted, but he made it into a house. He packed it with artifacts that had been saved, valued at around $50,000. Among them was the old toilet that Mick Jagger converted into a flower planter. It fit, but it seemed strange. Grace's nursery was stocked with textiles from the 19th century. By 2005, the children were playing with antiques and furniture. On the surface, everything appeared to be magical, but behind closed doors, things were tight. In a 2019 interview, Drew acknowledged that they came close to going bankrupt in 2004. It nearly broke them, and the repairs came to more than $20,000 more than they had budgeted. Rebecca formally joined Drew in the company in 2005. She had quit her high-profile fashion career in Hong Kong, where she was earning $80,000 annually. However, she recognized a new direction in 2004 after selling one vase for $5,000 or more. Her abilities facilitated the company's rapid expansion. Profits increased by 30% by 2006. It would sell for $3,500 if she were to imply that an old sofa was worth $1,000. By performing the repairs herself, she was able to save them $10,000 annually. However, things became unstable in 2007. They lost $2,000 in the transaction, since her assessment of an item didn't match Drew's intuition. Their trust was damaged. Nevertheless, they remained united and made an appearance as a cohesive unit in more than 100 episodes of Salvage Hunters. By 2010, family vacations were being used as sourcing trips. When they visited Italy in 2009, they discovered antiquities stashed in an attic and unexpectedly made $20,000 from them. Everything altered as a result. While in France in 2012, they discovered ceramics valued at $15,000. The children even joined in. At the age of 13, Tom was an expert at haggling for a $500 clock. Every year, they combined leisure and work by traveling more than 5,000 meters across Europe. However, their van containing $8,000 worth of antiques was stolen in 2013 while they were traveling to Spain. They recovered it just in time. It was horrible. Although these journeys were thrilling, they gradually began to negatively impact their personal life. Something occurred in 2015 that completely altered the situation. Amanda Thomas, who was married to his close friend Janice Bryn Thomas, was the object of Drew's affair. They concealed their relationship under the guise of business when they first met at antique gatherings. It lasted for 2 years while Drew and Rebecca were still married. Amanda tried to stop it, but Drew continued to message her. Then everything was revealed in 2017. Amanda received texts from other women, claiming to have dated Drew as well. At last, Amanda informed her husband. He'd seen Drew's number on her phone far too often already. At the height of Drew's fame, the entire situation blew apart. It worsened in October 2017. At the Liverpool Arms, a pub in North Wales, Janice approached Drew. He'd received a text from Drew calling him a coward. Janice punched him that night. The glasses shattered. When Drew fell to the ground, mayhem ensued. In court, Janice was fined $11.40 and barred from all Conway pubs. In addition to being barred from 44 pubs under the local pub watch ordinance, Drew chose not to file charges. He was losing his reputation. Rebecca and Drew got divorced later that year. 19 years had passed. Everyone knew it was due to the affairs, but the court labeled it irreconcilable differences. Even an old chapel they had converted into a house was divided. The value of that property alone was $795,000. Rebecca ensured the stability of their children. Drew left and made a fresh start in Bath. In an interview, Drew ultimately acknowledged the affairs in 2018. He said that he made poor decisions because his work-related stress became unbearable. However, it was not viewed as an excuse. They perceived it as a trend. He had relocated to a $1. After the divorce, a $5 million Georgian home in Bath. Despite his desire to restore, things continued to go wrong. Renovations to the bathroom struck a snag in 2021. He spent more than $100,000 more than he had anticipated and discovered concealed deterioration in the building. Already, $200,000 had been allocated to the project. Just the electricity and plumbing work cost $150,000. Despite his best efforts, he was exhausted by the project. Upstairs, he only completed a few rooms. The others remained vacant. He closed his Conway antique shop in 2022. Since its 2017 launch, it has grown to be a popular tourist destination. In the hopes of meeting him, fans would travel from all over. Jamie Oliver and other celebs have even been there. However, everything altered following the scandal of the divorce and adultery. Quietly announcing the closure, he begged people to stop coming. Something significant was coming to an end. He then put the majority of his personal collection, more than 620 pieces, up for auction. In 2024, more than $800,000 was raised at the auction. A 1930 fairground boat was one among the items, and it brought $7,000. Sir Malcolm Campbell's Bluebird project was associated with another item that sold for $17. However, Drew didn't care about the money. It hurt. He referred to the fragments as old friends. Parts of his life had to go in order to let them go. After more than 200 episodes, Drew had departed Salvage Hunters by 2023. He claimed to be worn out. He desired seclusion. He expressed his gratitude to Rebecca and the rest of the team for helping him develop the show from the beginning. However, too much had occurred. Public humiliation, court disputes, divorce, and scandal. He just was no longer able to maintain the public image. He took a break to concentrate on minor repairs and completing his bathhouse. He bid a silent farewell to a noisy and disorderly period of his life.